One of the most disturbing parts of the Flint story is that it took outside experts, discredited whistleblowers, and emails to expose the total failure of government that created the Flint water crisis. There's a lot to this story, but let's begin with the Flint mother. Her name is Leanne Walters.
My home was being tested because of the discoloration of my water and the health issues my family was experiencing.
Leanne said that she asked Miguel Del Toro to come to her home, where he found high elevations of lead within her water. She then went on to say that he was silenced.
Mr. Del Toro was told by the ethics attorney to forward all media requests, including those during his personal time. He was also advised not to talk about Flint or to anyone from Flint. In a meeting I had with MDEQ, Leanne Schechter-Smith bragged to me about how Mr. Del Toro had been handled, that his report was flawed, and that there would be no final report. This was the ultimate betrayal for the citizens. Susan Hedman cared more about policy than the welfare of the entire community, while punishing and silencing the one person that was willing to help us.
In that memo dated June 24, 2015 to the EPA, Del Toro wrote, "Recent drinking water sample results indicate the presence of high lead results in the drinking water. The lack of any treatment for lead is of serious concern for residents that live in homes with lead service lines or partial lead service lines, which are common throughout the city of Flint." The MDEQ did everything to discredit Del Toro's claims. Their spokesman Brad Werfel said anyone who's concerned about lead in the drinking water in Flint can relax, and then labeled him as a rogue employee.
This is a guy who wasn't allowed to travel. He suddenly had to go to ethics training. He had to do all these other things. That's how Region 5 and the EPA was operating.
And the EPA denied they had silenced Del Toro.
During the entire time period that Dr. Edwards imagines I was covering up data and silencing scientists, I was actually out of the office.
In response to the noise becoming created from the case, the city of Flint conducted their own lead tests in March 2015. They came back saying the water was in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. But there were some questions raised about what they had found, especially concerning the lead and copper rule.
What's become clear in Flint is they've never followed that first step, and therefore, frankly, all of their prior sampling results are invalid.
Other concerns raised about the initial testing were the city only collected 71 results when they needed 100 for a city of 100,000. Then, the state officials threw out 2 test results that pushed lead results under the 15 parts per billion requirement. And on top of all this, testers were flushing the water lines before taking test samples.
The fact that they hid the contamination and the fact that the lead was spiking in 2014 and they didn't tell anybody, and it was through their own tests that they found it.
While the city was at fault, the EPA has seen just as much of the blame towards covering Flint up. The EPA not only had silenced Del Toro, but they are at fault for not acting sooner with well-known knowledge. But the EPA continued to push blame on the MDEQ and Snyder's officials, leading to back and forth finger-pointing.
The crisis that we are seeing is a result of a state-appointed emergency manager deciding that that city would stop purchasing treated water that it had been successfully relying on for 50 years.
At the State of the State address on January 19, 2016, Governor Snyder announced he'd release emails from his staff between 2014 and 2015. Since Michigan is one of only 2 states where the governor is exempt from FOIA laws, they were released voluntarily. About a month later, the governor's office released a second batch of emails from 2011 to 2016. In these emails is where it gets even worse.
Michael Godola, he wrote an email on October 14th, 2014, stating, and I quote, "The notion that I would be getting my drinking water from the Flint River is downright scary."
In another email, which was a briefing to the governor from his departments in February 2015, says that it appears the mayor has seized on the public panic to ask the state for loan forgiveness and more money for their infrastructure improvement, dismissing Mayor Walling's outcry. The briefing finishes with, once the city connects to the KWA system in 2016, this issue will fade in the rear view. In another email from Chris Kalensky of the Michigan State Troopers says, as you know, the governor can declare at any time for any reason, meaning Snyder could have declared a state of emergency much sooner than he actually did, no matter if the city did or not. All of this information brings us to the ultimate question. How could Snyder not have known?
Our city council makes a vote in March of 2015 to get off of the Flint River, and he and the emergency manager turned it down, calling it incomprehensible. There's no way he didn't know.
Much of Snyder's staff, including his chief of staff, knew very well of the catastrophe at hand, whether it was the TTHM or lead and now Legionnaires. Is the state government truly that incompetent? Is the governor lying? Unfortunately, we don't know that. There are several simultaneous investigations being conducted by federal and state government with no conclusions as of yet. The emails released, the silenced EPA official, and the overall lack of acknowledgement among all parties in wrongdoing point to this Flint water crisis as not just a mishap, but a full-fledged cover-up.